Okay. Well, it is nice to be with you both. To start off with, could you say your names and where you are, please?
I'm Dori Middleman, right outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
And I'm Mark Putnam, also outside of Philadelphia, a little further outside than Dori.
Okay. So the first question that I have for you is, who are you to each other? Can you tell me a little bit about how we got to be in this room together?
So I went to Temple Medical School, and in the class below me was this wonderfully vibrant and interesting guy, Mark, who I saw in the hallways. And I had already become involved in Gestalt and Gestalt training at that point. And I'll let him finish his involvement, but that's how we met.
Yeah, and I don't think I knew of Dori before that, but she really engaged me. She was a year ahead, and she kept engaging me, so that was really nice. And then in the end, we found out we had other connections, which maybe we'll talk about. But because my wife was involved in Gestalt, and not as a clinician. And then a lot of our mutual friends, I found out were. So it became, it was kind of a community that was connected us, but we didn't know that in the beginning. At least I didn't. So yeah, it's great.
And so who would you say you have become to each other? Like, who is Mark in your life as a human being at this point, and vice versa?
Well, both Mark and I are married. Actually, our spouses knew each other before we knew each other, before Mark and I knew each other. Mark is such a close work partner for me. I mean, it's like a marriage without being married. I know him very well. He knows me very well. I feel accepted by him. I hope he feels accepted by me, and we're a wonderful team together. And a lot of the hot seat work we do in Gestalt, we lead together. So we don't necessarily benefit from taking turns as much as we do from sharing who each of us is in the work.
Yeah, I felt very loved by Dori.
Yeah.
So and it's a very special relationship. It's long-standing, and we'll talk about how we work together with Mariah Gladys, and coming up, supporting her and her work, and then really emerging into us working as partners. Yeah. And we each have our strengths. I think it just kind of, like Dori said, in the work that we do and the hot seat work, when we're working together, it's very fluid. And I think we found our roles together as far as the center. And, it's lovely. It's lovely.
Okay.
And it's part of we're part of a larger family, which is really holds us with what we do. Not only a Gestalt community, but our families are intermingled, and which is really wonderful. Yeah.
Thank you. And so individually, the first big question that I ask in humans is who are you as a human being? And the fun part here is that then you can each add a little bit to what the other person says about themselves. But who would you say you are as a human? And that can be your passions, qualities about yourself, maybe some of your central values, whatever you'd like to share.
You want me to go, Dori?
Sure.
Well,
you go ahead, Mark.
This is a funny time to have that question. I just came off of a 2-week retreat, Sufi Buddhist retreat. And that was the question, who am I? And what am I shedding? And who am I now? Because I'm at the point, I've had a very traditional career on the outside, as far as I ran a hospital as chief medical officer for a psych hospital. I built a big practice. I, managed, was director for like 4 different agencies, and all of that is pretty much gone. So it has been a process of shedding. And so who am I? I'm I am at this point rediscovering who I am. As those roles, as we talk about in Gestalt, fade away, I'm so thankful about my relationship with myself and the support I have, because that could be really disconcerting. And it's been wonderful. It's really an opening and a rebirth. So I think who I am is someone who's very open to discovering what's happening next in the moment, and who I am as I move forward. It is going to be a discovery. I think if someone else would describe me, they'd describe me as very loving, caring, willing to go the extra mile with people, smart, I don't know, courageous, insecure at times, needing reassurance, and feeling very blessed in my life of what I have, the people in my life, but also I think for having been able to allow this life to happen, so I don't know. That's where I am right now, today. So,
Yeah,
Does
I
that
want to
sound about right to you, Dori?
add to Mark's description of himself. When you said that, all of, the work that you've done is gone, it lives on. And we just celebrated Mark's, 30 years, almost 30 years as a leader in the town of Reading, Pennsylvania, taking care of probably hundreds of thousands of patients. We just celebrated that with his staff at the clinics where he's worked, and with our Gestalt community. It's just such a deserved tribute. So many of the people that worked in this community mental health agency became Gestalt trainees and have carried Gestalt work into a community mental health setting, which I think is a wonderful use of Gestalt. Wonderful that you've done that, Mark. I'm feeling like
It almost sounds like the L word. It almost sounds like you're talking about someone with a legacy.
yeah, it's going to be a challenge for anyone to come in and carry that forward as you have done, Mark, as I think we both know. But you've got a core of good people there that I hope carry it.
Yeah, I think they,
Important work.
yeah, it's in their hearts, I think. Yeah.
I'm feeling as a person in mid-60s now, like I'm happily settled with who I am in a way that I think just comes with living a long life. And music is a very important part of my life. I spent the first many years of my life through college very serious as a cellist and studied with top teachers and had some wonderful experiences. I think I learned, as people often say, a discipline, but just a passion through that, and came to a fork in the roads where I knew that I wasn't really the committed practicing musician that one had to be to make a career of it. And also had such a strong social justice, human service message from my family that it would have been really hard just to be a musician without being involved in something in the work of helping the world. So it was a good choice that I made and I also always wanted to be a doctor anyway, so that made it easier. So it made it, I made that choice of going into this field and putting music as a hobby. But I think it's been been made much easier by having married music. My husband is a professional musician, conductor, professor at Temple University, and is everything. His whole life is about music, and so I share that with him. We go to a lot of concerts and have music in our home all the time. So that's been a comfortable integration of that part of my life with who I am now. The Gestalt work, when I found it, was like, now I understand how to help people, because I've been struggling before that as a line staff member, working in a residential treatment center with adolescents, and really, having the care and the love in my heart for them. A lot of us became their, and parents while they were living there for long-term treatment, but just didn't have the tools. And so when I discovered Gestalt, I felt like, okay, now I know how to help people. And so it became a way for me to help myself, to develop a healthy, loving relationship with myself, which had been a struggle earlier in my life. And Gestalt has given me the training that was so important in raising my children, my two children, to help them feel loved and understood and supported. So they're grown. And Mark said we'll talk more about Mariah and the Gestalt Center a little later on, but working with Mariah for really almost 30 years was, a wonderful training and healing experience in itself to be part of her talent for being with people and her gifts. So it feels so natural to be continuing that on. Mark and I were at a junction when Mariah passed about 5 years ago of, well, what do we do with this magnificent program that she's created? And we didn't want to let go. We wanted to continue it and grow it. So that's my life's work now. And, I love what I do. I love the work I do in my office with patients that I prescribe medicine for. I feel, connected to them in a way that I have been trained to do through Gestalt, but it feels very natural to what I believe about accepting people and appreciating their differences and celebrating the differences of people. So yeah, I feel like I'm exactly where I need to be in my life. And I love that I'm, with my husband. I also love that I'm with Mark and my kids are launched. So that's who I am at the moment.
Did you say your kids are launched?
They're launched. They're in their mid-20s. They're both have their own health insurance. Yay. And
That's an American rite of passage.
yeah, that's a challenge for many young adults, and they both have places to live that it's not under my roof, which is good for them. So yeah.
Would you say that that sounds like the Dori you know, Mark?
Absolutely. I
Mhm.
mean, I feel Dori embodies herself completely. And, her strength comes across to everyone, and her brilliance. One of the things I really admire about Dori is how she takes everything that she has experienced in her life and her trainings, and it just comes out. Comes out at the right time, and it's formulated in a way that I can't put together. I mean, I know what she's saying, but oftentimes I can't organize in the way she does and how she formulates that. And I feel like that's the lens she looks through, is a really integrated person. And
I'm smiling in part because I appreciate what you're saying. And I could be saying exactly the same words about you, Mark.
okay, well, that's interesting. Yeah.
Well, I have another question. I do want to ask you both about Gladys and about your relationship and your learning and your experience there. But I'm also curious what you would say was an event in your lives, in your respective lives, that really significantly shaped or changed or gave some kind of direction to who you are.
Yeah, so I'll go, I guess. Probably, I grew up on a farm, loving family. And my father died when I was 10. He was 60 though when I was born. So, my mom was 44. And that was gigantic for me. And I still process that, I mean, I've done so much processing of it and grieving. And yet it's a gift to me, because I feel like, in the end, it's helped me open my heart in a way that I probably wouldn't have. So that was big for me. the next event that happened was around age 18. I had really not grieved him. And I really didn't have the support for that in the way that I, probably needed. My family provided really well for me. They loved me. But I had a mentor who actually just passed away a year ago, who did a piece of work with me. And I was heading to engineering school, at least I thought I was. And he did this piece of work, which was a really deep piece of Gestalt work. It was really like a primal therapy. And it changed my thinking of where I was going to go in my life. There's a whole series of events that happened around that. But those two periods in my life really formulated my direction, and really a strong influence of what it ended up doing. So I spent the early, from age 20 through my 20s, doing really deep work, personal work. I did primal therapy, if you know anything about that. That was the thing to do back in the 70s, and for me, it was perfect because I was a wide open kid, really shattered and really needed and really already in a very open place. And it really helped me to really be able to trust my organism and know what that really meant. So I feel very blessed by that, because I feel like I've lived my adult life knowing that I have myself, I have my organism, my sense of myself. And that if I'm lost, I just go into feeling and I go into following what process is coming up. So that led me to feel that I could help other people, that I wanted to be with other people. And I did other things. I was chimney sweep. I had a construction business. I had a small crew, in my 20s, and then went back to school, and with the intent of going to medical school. And I toyed with international medicine for a bit. I went to India and I loved that. And yet my heart was of doing this work. So then I went through the whole thing and went to psychiatry. And it was during that time that I met Dori. I met my wife, who had already trained with Mariah, and my old girlfriend who trained with Mariah. So it was pretty inevitable that I would get to my first workshop. But those early times, 18, 20, that really formulated the rest of my life. And I remember at that time in the primal community I was in, an older man, I thought he was older, he's probably 35 at that point, said to me, "You won't recognize who you are in a few years." And I didn't quite know what he meant, but he was really right, because it was I was transformed by doing all of that work and that personal work. So I think that's my trajectory of getting here and doing this. And it was the right path for me. It's been really something I can live on a daily basis with people, with my heart with people. And I feel like in some ways it's led me to this moment. This is an important moment for me, and what's next. Feels like a lot of the things that I've done, it's all based on all of that early growth, and then meeting Mariah and working with her, and then working with Dori. So, yeah.
So I'm not sure. There's a number of events I guess I could cite, but really don't know too much about this time in my life, Mark. But when I was a college student, I had spent my first summer, as many college students do, at home working in a job that was like a secretary in an office. Not very exciting, and I really needed to be free of my family, loving family, but some issues. And I'd found this half a page notice in the career office at my college saying, summer school teachers needed, $35 a week and room and board in Newark, New Jersey. And that sounded perfect.
Who could turn that down? 35 bucks a week, man.
So I lived in Chicago, so I took my cello on the train to Newark. And I
Yeah.
hadn't really, it was the days before the computer, and people didn't even do long distance calls so readily in those days. So I didn't know for sure that I was going to get picked up, but I showed up at the Newark train station with my cello and indeed went to a school that was a former parochial school and worked for a summer in a third grade classroom. And I worked with a bunch of other college students, probably who were a little bit older than I was. And they were extremely hardworking. And just, carrying huge boxes of books, piles of books to clean out classrooms and, sweating through the summer heat, and there's no air conditioning, of course. And my bedroom was the sacristy in the parish, the parish hall, where the nuns used to live. The sacristy, I didn't even know what that was, but that's where all the robes and the religious items were kept. So we moved those out, and that was my tiny little room. So it was a wonderful experience of communal living with people who were very different. Some people who had grown up in poor neighborhoods in the city, very diverse culturally. And I became part of the staff there, not at the school that really was too challenging to teach kids. And I became an administrator of a program that provided supplies to a lot of the summer programs that served kids in the city of Newark, and spent the next 2 summers driving a van. Sometimes when the van drivers were drunk and didn't show up and didn't want to get $35 to work for a day driving kids, and picking up supplies from, used books from public schools, and taking out art supplies to all the different neighborhoods in Newark, New Jersey. So that gave me an experience of real service, which I was hungry for, and led to my starting my own big tutoring program at the college. I went to Bryn Mawr College. So the Bryn Mawr and Haverford communities supported a tutoring program of about 75 college students going into the Germantown neighborhood of Philadelphia, which led to my meeting someone who helped with writing a grant proposal. We opened a community center. So that became, moved in the neighborhood. My house was a tutoring center for a while. And it was a great way to start adulthood, or to start life after college, to have that kind of process of being around people who really knew how to work, who were committed to kids and committed to communities and wanted to make a difference. And I was mulling what would be my life's work. At that point, I had sort of given up on medical school and college to do all kinds of other things. And I decided to try working in the mental health field, and really had great experiences as an intro person with, no training, working in a psych hospital. And as I mentioned, working in long-term residential treatment with teenagers. So that's kind of what led me into this life of work in psychiatry, and later went back to medical school and met Mark. So those experiences, those early experiences, while I didn't wind up moving to Newark permanently, it didn't wind up being a teacher or an educational program administrator, were really, really helpful to me. And just learning how to, put my self-interest aside and do what needed to be done. So, yeah.
I never heard that early part of that
Oh, you
story.
did. I know.
It's great.
Yeah.
Wow.
Thank you. So excuse me, I usually ask, who has been a significant influence in your life? I don't know if you'd like to mention anyone else, because I know you both mentioned Mariah, and I don't know much about her. I know there's a book, The Wounded Healer. Some people from Esalen have vaguely mentioned her. That's all I have. So if the two of you would like to speak to who she was in your lives, I would be really happy to hear that.
Well, Mariah was, had her own challenging background, being a child of an alcoholic mom who deprived her of a relationship with her father. She grew up in a single parent home. So she had her own challenges about which she was very public, and became a social worker, and had a natural instinct for how to connect with people. Being with Mariah would make me and everybody who was with her feel like they were seen and loved. she was wonderfully intense about the way in which she made contact. And she trained in Gestalt back in the early days of, I guess it would have been maybe the early 70s. She
Yeah, it
became
was probably around 72, 74.
so soon after Pearls died, which is 1970, she trained and she found that Gestalt was her natural fitting method, and developed her own center in the Delaware Valley, the Philadelphia area, before anybody else was doing Gestalt work, and blended her love of pop music songs with Gestalt, picking a song that had the right sentiment and lyrics to fit an individual piece of hot seat work, and incorporated or developed a way of using the group so that the group would play roles like in psychodrama. So the empty chair would always get filled with a live human being. She believed a lot in the value of touch and the essential ingredient in healing being love, including and essentially love from the therapist to the client. So she was, quite an amazing human being. She developed ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, right before she said yes to a marriage proposal from her husband, who knew very well what he was getting into and believed that together they could beat it or live through it. And she lived for 40 years with ALS, gradually losing the ability first in her thumb and her hands, and her speech became affected. And she was at that point leading workshops, weekend workshops in many places, and became a regular faculty member at the Esalen Institute, and led twice a year workshops out there that were packed with waiting lists, because people recognized that her way of connecting with them, they could really get their deep core needs met. And the work that she did was magnificent therapist. So when I first attended her workshop, it was like, this is what I want to do. This is the answer to my question about how to help people. How can I really help someone? And so I became an assistant after I graduated from the 3-year training program that she was running. I became her assistant, as people had done, but I stayed for 30 plus years through her life, and as did Mark when he joined a short time later. So the experience that we often talk about is, as her speech failed and became more difficult for people in the public to understand, she developed this sort of typical ALS accent, which is something that can be learned, but is not necessarily something a person who's new immediately understands. Mark and I and her husband Ron would repeat her words. So at public events, she would say her words, and then we would translate them so that everyone could understand. And that was an incredible way to learn her craft, to be able to anticipate what she would say, which we often would do, and to get inside of her shoes in that way, as well as to wipe her nose when it was running. She'd say nose, and so many things became a part of the job of assisting Mariah, out of love for her. So we had a very deep friendship, and I miss her. So miss her to this day. We'll always miss her. And her spirit certainly is alive and well in our Gestalt work. So I'm happy about that.
So I'll fill in a few more pieces. Mariah, when she got out of college, took a job and immediately was put in within a short time as the administrator for a clinic. I don't remember where it was now. And she realized she didn't know what she was doing. And so she brought in clinicians from all different fields, and it was Gestalt that she connected with. And she was instrumental after starting the center here and training some of the other people who started another Gestalt center. And there was a lot of collaboration back then, but she was the really the driving force in this area. when she got diagnosed with ALS, she was given 10% chance to live 2 years. And it was that night that her husband proposed to her, knowing it's the most amazing story. And they both, and Mariah would say, and Ron would say, I'm not dying. I just know I'm not dying. And they proceeded to move ahead and have 2 children and, live another 38 years, and probably didn't really die of ALS in the end. We don't really know. And that taught her so much. I think she already was an amazing clinician, and her experience, she fully integrated into her work. She became more succinct over the years. So what I learned, one of the most important things I learned, is you don't need a lot of words to facilitate work, and it gets in your way. So as we train our clinicians, we're often giving them very simple lines. This is what you say next. This is how, what you might say. And I learned that, like Dori said, from the inside out from her by repeating her words. It was, there was another therapist that I, in my child fellowship, I did child guidance, child psychiatry fellowship, who said the way he learned is he played every tape that he had of his mentor, repeated the lines until they became part of him. And that was the experience of working with Mariah. She was really a shining star. I mean, what people experience with her is that sense just of being fully loved, and that nothing else is happening in the world except them. And, she would say, I think it was probably in the back, I don't think it's a shock now, but back years ago, for people to talk about love and, express that in a therapeutic setting, that wasn't.
It's still taboo a lot of places.
I know, it's so common for us now. It's so part of what we live, but
As
but
an
it was,
aside to that, I just ended with work at a clinic, and a lot of my medication patients said, I love you. And I said, I love you, because I have that feeling in my heart for them. It's like, that doesn't happen in medication relationships very often. And it's about human contact. So.
yeah.
And that's a very big difference, is somebody just giving you pills because they want you to go away and giving you pills with love. That's a very different setting.
Yeah. It's all about the relationship. It's not about the pills. That's the easy part, as a clinician to figure out. It's really about how do you be with somebody and really care for them and love for them, join with them.
And want the best for them. Even
Yeah.
if you can't get it from a pill, to want the best for them, to want healing for them, to want, the resolution of some sort for traumas that they've experienced, or want them to get over the loss of a child, which is impossible to ever get over. Just to want something for them is what we can give sometimes.
And I don't know if I'll say the words exactly, but Mariah used to talk about that. She doesn't see problems. She sees people's hopes and dreams, and joining what people want the most in their life, in their relationships.
People reaching for health.
Yeah, reaching for health.
Reaching for health, that kind of stands out. I'm curious how you experienced this yourselves and with Mariah. I mean, my personal way of dealing with therapy is very mortalist. Like, this is not going to give you eternal life and, glowing health and restore and cure and take away the mortality of being in a decaying body. I'm curious if you have anything to say sort of about that aspect, or that awareness of mortality, fallibility, vulnerability.
Mariah didn't focus at all on mortality. She focused on trying to, eke through the next day and the next day and the next day, even if it would take 2 hours to get her dressed and ready for the day, which it did at the end with caregivers. One of the titles of a talk she gave, we turned it into a brochure, is "Bitterness is Not an Option." This was her approach to living with ALS, that she saw ALS as her teacher of how to love herself really well, how to love her body for all that it provided for her every day, to love her body for it being able to receive the love and care that she got, to appreciate that having ALS would mean that doors would be open for her. She called that one of the perks of ALS. So her focus, and I guess our focus, is really on how to live well and how to love ourselves well, so that while we're here, we can benefit the most and give the most. And for me, that makes death not such something that I have to dread at all. It's like a natural process that I suspect I, as many others have, will welcome at the time when it's not good for me to continue living in this body.
Yeah, I was reading a quote by Hazrat Inayat Khan, a Sufi, and it said, "Love is more powerful than death." And I would think that that's Mariah's refrain as well.
Yeah, so one of the things that Ron, her husband, talks about is that they lived with sacred denial. So to deny that death could be right around the corner allowed them to live fully well and feeling blessed and appreciating the day.
I am, given my early roots of losing a father, death has always been with me, on my shoulder. I will often lead, we in our workshops, we'll do group exercises in preparation for the hot seat work. And we have a stepwise things we do. And I'll often do exercises around that last moment or that last period of time. And what do you want? And having advice from you, as you imagine yourself at that time, about what you need to do in your life now. And how do you support yourself? And how do you love yourself more? And how do you deepen your relationships? So I think that's me in the work. That's really important. Yet it's not front and central, probably, in that way. Yeah.
Okay. So is there anything else that you wanted to add about how you've taken your experience and your other experiences outside of Mariah forward in your lives? I guess the question is, how do you do what you do now? Out of these influences, out of this background, out of these experiences.
So when Mariah was alive, the Gestalt Center, Pennsylvania Gestalt Center, was very much about Mariah. It was her source of income. It was her stage to develop her craft and to come up with new ideas and ways of working with Gestalt and groups. With her passing, that space was empty then, and Mark and I, sort of tentatively went forward with workshops and found out that we too could do the hot seat work, and we too could create the magic of her model, which we've continued to use as far as the use of music and the use of group exercises, and always having some live body in the hot seat and having people holding one another when they need that, and love being essential to all the work that we do. Being the age that we are, we both agreed that the most important thing for us to do, besides enjoying being able to continue the work, which we both love, is to expand the leadership so that new people could come in learn what we do when we teach Gestalt, learn what we do when we lead workshops, and that they would be younger and able to take the Gestalt Center forward so that it would have a long life. So it seems that we're succeeding in doing that with new faculty members and new potential leadership for the future when we become ready to let go of that. So that's been an important, that's the sort of the big goal of our present work.
So I'm not quite answering your question, but there's a few things that have been I think, really important contribution in Gestalt from Mariah. And it's not only Mariah, but I think the way the depth she took that to, she had a few signature workshops. One was creating exact moments of healing. Another's arriving already loved, intimate connections, another. What really the belief that it's not too late to have what you need in your life. So that if you did not have the depth of love you needed to experience from a father, or an apology from someone, or to apologize to someone, or to be rescued in a trauma, or to be protected, we work to create those moments. So the person has that neurologic experience of feeling a new pathway, a new experience, so that the trauma, or wherever it is, will never be experienced in the same way. So we do really, we do a lot of work on trauma, which is a broad, title. But it's, that to me has been so important because it's so hopeful for people. A lot of people go into therapy and they think it's about coping with the way it is, and that's the way it is. I'll never get what I need. I don't believe that. And Mariah didn't believe that. And that we can create whatever moment that person's organism needs for the next step developmentally, so they can move on to the next step. So I think that's really important because I'm not connected enough to the rest of the Gestalt communities to know where people stand on that. But that's really probably one of the core beliefs or kind of practices or foundations that we do our work on. So our workshops, people come, and they work on anything. They work on unfinished moments of grief, trauma that they need to work on. We love having the real relationships in the room. So we try to get families in the room in a workshop and couples. People work on the next steps in their life, on mortality. But we've kept it going the way we really use the same model, and really it's not so much the model, we know it from the inside out. So we're doing this work kind of on, based on what we were trained, but also really in the same context, the way Mariah did it. And I think, our commitment is to train good clinicians out there, whether they become part of faculty, but we really want to know that people are out there knowing what's possible for other people. Just a lot of people come into therapy and become clinicians. They've never had the experience of knowing what's possible in healing. They maybe never had their own experience. So in our training program, we have three 3-year training programs running concurrently. It's really professional growth and personal growth. And a lot of the people that we come into the program are not clinicians. They are in other fields, come in for the personal growth, but then on a professional side, they learn how to be with someone, how to facilitate contact, how to facilitate dialogue, and they use that in their life with their families or business. And so we're continuing all of that too. The training program was really important to Mariah, and was always really important to Dori and I for that commitment of, you get 3 years with people in a program, and people are doing really deep work. You become a family, and that's what's turned into our community, that we have a strong community of people regionally and across the country that know they have a home here. So
And we really also believe that you don't have to be a therapist to take what you learn at a weekend workshop or at an event with us out into your family and your community, and to be better at communicating your care for people, and to be better at listening and eliciting what your people who are close to you want or need, and improving relationships that way, and that there can be a trickle out effect in the world from, an event with a fixed number of people that can touch many, many more lives. So that's our hope.
Mhm. I am curious about how you both understand and experience, personally and professionally, power and privilege dynamics.
Well, I think I come from, as growing up Unitarian, I come from a place of valuing people for their differences, which is really also what we do in Gestalt. I welcome the opportunity for people to share something new about themselves that challenges me and other people to learn about a different way that they've grown up, or a different culture that they've lived in, or a different struggle that they've had being who they are, or finding the freedom for that. I love work with my inner city community, where I've been part of a psychiatrist and working with population in a very poor neighborhood in Philadelphia, all mostly African-American, maybe a couple of Hispanic people. I love interacting with people of that community. It feels very normal to me. I'm not, a part of the community, and I don't fully understand the struggles they've been through, but I really value their sharing that experience with me. I work with a lot of trans people at a residential treatment, so I've really put myself in positions where I can immerse myself in the lives of people with differences, to try to understand, to contribute what I can. I want our Gestalt Center, and we're working on that, to expand and become a more diverse community. That's really important for people's growth, and so that we can train people to be contributors to a bigger world than the little town in which each of us lives. So it's not a fixed answer like, I know how to be with diversity, but I really appreciate being privileged to learn about people's different experiences. And I think that's a foundation for creating a sense of community, one-on-one and in bigger and bigger groups.
So this is something that I'm faced with in the next stage of what I do. I'm also will probably be training people to work with psychedelics. And the concern, the question is, at this point, until there's models for this, it's going to be a privileged experience. So I'm really been exploring and pushing on what models we can pick. And I used to sit on I gave that up as I gave up all these job things. Used to sit on the medical directors board for one of the major managed care companies in Pennsylvania, and was pushing them about, you need equitable models. You need to look at this issue around privilege, who's going to get access to care, because there's a real risk with this, as there always has been, but even more so with this, with being able to have this being not a privileged issue. So that's and I think that dovetails into what Dori's saying. We haven't talked a lot about this, but I'd like to a whole separate area of training for working with psychedelics, because I think Gestalt as a model, trusting the organism, being able to have the skill to work with what's unfolding, is a perfect for that. But to how to do this in an equitable way. So I've been looking at models about how to do that and deal with the issue of privilege. And it's so, for me, on this training that I'm doing, I'm confronted with that all the time and my privilege. And it's from coming from a poor farming family, it's a very interesting juxtaposition, with where I am now in my life. So.
Well, I don't know that this model fits that challenge, but back before the Affordable Care Act made health insurance available to people, I set up a program called Center for a Healthy World. And the model for that was that people could get therapy by paying for it with volunteer work that they did, so that it would be an exchange. So the therapist would volunteer, and in exchange for their volunteering, they would have access to some training programs that I put through with speakers from all kinds of different backgrounds doing different techniques. And that the clients would benefit because they didn't have to pay cash for that they would do a couple of hours of work for a therapy session. And so, I'm just sorting through old papers and throwing stuff out and shredding stuff. Thousands and thousands of hours of volunteer work were generated by that. And some people got excellent therapy with therapists that I know and refer to every day who get paid for their work. And, I think some people are still using the model. I didn't monitor it very much because it didn't really need monitoring. And, I think that was a really good experience for a lot of people. Became less necessary in a sense because having access to affordable insurance made it more possible for people to find care. Although I still get calls and I still refer people sometimes to places where I know they can get low cost care. So it's really important. It's I don't know with psychedelics. It's so costly now for people to get ketamine, which is one of our first psychedelics. You have to have, $400 a pop for that or more. It's just not really an option, although I did hear about Medicaid covering it for someone. So that makes it an interesting challenge to try to get that done again if someone needs it.
Yeah, the model you had, which was really wonderful, maybe something we could look at. And also, I'm looking at a lot of the nonprofits who have people pay more who can afford it, and it supports people who can. So
you've helped us start to think forward about that with our programs, like Gestalt Center, to encourage people to give extra if they can to support someone else coming who couldn't afford it otherwise. And this year we've finally instituted a scholarship program, and we're supporting a number of people coming to our programs who otherwise might not have been able to come. And same thing with our training program that we're giving scholarships, long needed. And, I think Mariah was the main support of her family, being fully disabled to be the main support of her family is quite an amazing, accomplishment that she did that. And, and Ron was busy running the center, running her life, managing AIDS, doing his own business as a film guy and editor on the side. But it good reasons why it was the way it was. And now, neither of us need the Gestalt Center as our primary support. So we have the freedom of being able to create some new things.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious what you would say that your most significant challenges have been, just because that word popped up a second ago.
That's my most significant challenge.
Oh, God.
That's just a small fraction
Mm-hmm.
paperwork that still is part of my daily life, in seeing my patients and I do my own billing. I do my own Medicare billing. Medicare is the only insurance that I accept. So I have a large and increasing number of older and disabled patients. So it's a service I can provide, and I do it. And I wish I had more hours in the day to not do that part of it.
I know this, I don't want to sound hokey, but my biggest challenge is who I am. The first question you asked is really, my commitment is to continue to serve and to create and to mentor and not wanting to get myself in the position where I was before of carrying all kinds of stuff. So I'm giving myself a lot of room to feel that. So I think it's more of a personal challenge. I don't have those challenges like Dori has, thank God, like I used to. What's that? I used to. So, so that it's more of my personal challenge of, staying here and really giving myself what I need. And then it'll happen, it'll. So.
Well, and you've also spoken, both of you, a bit to this, but I'm going to ask it anyhow. I mean, where do you see yourselves and Gestalt going?
Well, for me, on a personal level, it's, whether this will change at some point, I don't know. I have my personal commitment is to continue this work, probably till I can't do it any longer. Which, as a therapist, we're lucky to be able to, as long as you can breathe and talk, you can do a lot, So that's my personal commitment. Gestalt, in the States, as you know, it's not been the primary modalities. And I see that changing. At least I see, and that's part of why we're doing what we do, is to bring this work and have it ripple out. I think there's on this whole group I'm on, there's 300 of us on this cohort of learning about psychedelics. Gestalt's really one of in that group, it's very appreciated and well understood. Gave me a lot of hope.
It's like a little fish in water.
What's that?
It's like a fish in water.
Oh, yeah, it was. Yeah. So, I don't, what we both of us have not been very tied into the more organizational structures of Gestalt, and really doing what we do. So I'm very hopeful about Gestalt in that context, that there's a place that this is going to fit much more as things change in the fields of how do you really be with people, how do you really help people, and how do you heal, and how do you bring authenticity to your work. So, yeah.
I've attended, especially earlier in my life, I attended a number of conferences. I spent time going to other people's Gestalt work. And in conferences, I found a lot more talk about theory than I was looking for, and not enough true experiential work. So, yeah, I think that's one thing that is very true of our center, is that we're very experiential. We do expect people to read books and to write some papers. And all of our students, when they graduate, can design and run a Gestalt exercise. They all can do as good a piece of hot seat work as people who are out there on the professional market leading workshops. Because I've been to those workshops, and a lot of those people don't have some basic skills that I think would be sort of logical that they might have being Gestalt trained. So I've been surprised at that in the field, at how lacking some centers or some individuals are in the skills of really being effective group leaders and experiential leaders. So that's a little bit of a criticism of Gestalt. I think the world at large holds many group therapists who are very creative. So it is possible to find that, but Gestalt has been sort of at a national level, has been a bit of a mixed experience for me. A little bit disappointing at times. And I can't say I've been to every conference, so it's not fair to necessarily make that assumption, but for a while I did go to a bunch. I like the individuals that I met. That was fun.
Well, I think the last thing that I would really like to ask both of you is how you would succinctly say that Gestalt has affected you as a person.
Well, that's pretty easy. Gestalt has given me a model for improving my relationship with myself, so that from one moment to the next, I'm checking in with myself to see, how do I feel? What do I want or need? What's going on in my body? And to figure out a way to provide for myself really pretty well. So, and to stop the language of criticism that somewhere I learned and picked up earlier in my life, that was really the mainstay of my relationship with myself at one time. And it's just so gone from, or almost totally gone from, how I am with myself. So, it's as something of personal value that Gestalt gave, it's really that. And I also credit Gestalt with opening my abilities to partner and to meet and mate with my husband. So that's absolutely been part of my my love, my world of love. So
Wow.
Yeah, so when I came to my first workshop in Memory, I felt I was coming home. And after having done personal growth work and the primal work, deeply feeling work, it was in a sense of, there was a completion, and it was not only about what I was feeling, what I was aware of, but it was like, how do I bring myself into the world? How do I make contact? How do I create contact that's meaningful to somebody else, and where I'm changed and they're changed? So Gestalt is, theory-wise has given me that, but also on a personal level, on a day-to-day level and doing the work, I live it. And it's really a living way of being with myself and others. One thing that we didn't talk about, but is really important to me is, in our workshops, when somebody does a really deep piece of work and they're being, say, held by their father or whatever, and they're having a moment they've never had or they've needed, it's a sacred moment. They're really sacred moments. So to me, that's about being beyond the person. It's about us as humans being able to love, and love in a bigger word. And so I can attribute Gestalt as supporting my spiritual growth and my capacity to be beyond my individual little box that I'm in, and that it's so that for me it's been such a gift, and more as I get older, every day it feels richer. And if I get lost, I have those steps that I already talked about. What am I needing now? What do I need to do? But yeah.
yeah, we're very privileged to be able to be in that space of people opening themselves to getting what they need and being more available for love. It's really it's a privilege.
Well, my last request would be if either of you have a question for the other. It seems like it would be appropriate to ask at this point.
That's interesting.
I'm interested in learning more, and it doesn't have to be in the here and now, about how you have extended yourself to make a difference at an international level in doing the training that you've done, and just reaching so many lives that way. I just think that's so honorable.
She's asking you, Heather.
Oh, is that for me?
That was for you.
Oh.
I was good. I was saying international. Wow, that's interesting. I haven't done that yet.
I was like, oh, well, Mark must have, when Mark went to India and did other things. No.
Oh, no, this is for you, but like I said, you don't have to answer it now, but
I think it hasn't settled in fully in the here and now. It's sort of like I'm here and I'm beyond where my physical body is. But I haven't had the experience of, being in the same physical space as a lot of the people that I feel very connected to. So it's sort of an evolving process that has not yet been embodied, but is also very real on a different level. So I don't know yet, I think is my short answer.
Did you mean a question for?
Yeah, you for Mark, Mark for you. I mean, you know things about each other that I wouldn't know to hint at or poke, so.
Oh, boy. Oh. I love working with you, Mark.
Yes, I know. Me too. Yeah. I don't know what to ask Dori.
I don't know either.
That's fair. It sounds like you guys have a lot of communication, so maybe
Yeah,
there's
one of us
something
comes up
unsaid.
with an idea, the other one goes, yeah, that would be a great idea.
Yeah.
All right, well, is there anything either of you would like to add?
I don't know, I think this is wonderful what you're doing. It's whatever happens, it's this has been really sweet. And it's really nice for me to be with Dori and talk in this way. We do demonstrations and free demonstrations to get people introduced, and we tell our little stories, but I heard things today I haven't heard before, which was wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, we've had a lot of fun in our recent demos on this side of the the area.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate your openness, and for me, it's always it's nice to sort of be a little bit more than a fly on the wall, and get to experience your relationship a
I
little
know
bit.
what I wanted to say to you was, I have this image with, since I heard about Humans of Gestalt and you're doing this, which is probably a year or two ago, of 200 years from now, someone watching our lives on Humans of Gestalt, and they're going to say, what is this object? Paper?
Mhm.
We're not going to know a lot of the things that are part of our world now. And I sure hope that Gestalt survives such a long existence and continues to help people. So if I can be indelible in some way, and this may make me somewhat indelible, I'm really thrilled.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, if it's okay with you, I will stop the recording and leave this one here for now. And I, again, just really appreciate your time and your openness and your sharing.
Great. Been great. Thank you.